Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rachak Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Jeremiah, the 22nd chapter, warning of Jerusalem's fall. So this is Jeremiah chapter 22, verse 1. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, go down to the house of the king of Judah, and speak there this word, and say, hear ye the word of the Lord Yahweh, O king of Judah, that sitteth upon the throne of David, thou and thy servants and thy people that enter in by these gates. And so basically at the palace, right, or the royal entrance of where the nobility, in this case the king of Judah, would dwell. Now, I believe at this time, if I'm not mistaken, it might have been it doesn't give too much detail as to who it was, but I think at this time Josiah was already dead. So from the way Jeremiah prophesies, it sounds like it might have been his son Shalom, who was ruler at the time, or maybe it might have been Josiah. But in any case, the Lord tells him to go to the dwelling of the king of Judah and to prophesy these words. Verse 3, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, execute ye judgment and righteousness, and deliver the spoiled out of the hand of the oppressor, and do no wrong, do no violence to the stranger, the fatherless, nor the widow, neither shed innocent blood in this place. So basically, being that you are the current ruler, right, rather than allowing this iniquitous ways of the people to go on, as it says, execute judgment and righteousness, right, and deliver the spoiled or the oppressed out of the hand of the oppressor. And usually the oppressed would be those that were either poor or widows or fatherless, basically that didn't have any support system or anything like that, or that were just being subject or made prey to those that were richer or in higher positions of authority. As it says, and do no wrong and do no violence to the stranger, which is a foreigner that may come into your land, the fatherless nor the widow, neither shed innocent blood in this place. For if ye do this indeed, then shall there enter in by the gates of this house kings sitting upon the throne of David, riding in chariots and on horses, he and his servants and his people. Now, you may say, well, I mean, wasn't that already happening? So why is it saying that if you do good, then that's what's going to happen? But what it means is that if you follow the instructions of the Lord, you will continue, right? There will be a continuity of government, so to speak, where the Lord would preserve and allow there to always be one that would sit on the throne of David, right? That would be able to continue to enter in by these gates, and rule over the people. But if ye will not hear these words, I swear by myself, saith the Lord Yahweh, that this house shall become a desolation. So both the house of the king of Judah, right, the palace, and Jerusalem in itself, okay, shall become a desolation, quite literally. For thus saith the Lord Yahweh unto the king's house of Judah, thou art Gilead unto me, and the head of Lebanon. And what that means is, Gilead was likened onto like a fruitful region, right? That's why it mentions it being the head of Lebanon. Yet surely I will make thee a wilderness. So the Lord is saying, you're like you're right now, you have people in the land, right? You're likened onto a fruitful pasture or field. But if you disobey me, I'm going to make you a wilderness, right? I'm going to make you desolate, as it says, and cities which are not inhabited. And I will prepare destroyers against thee, everyone with his weapons. And these would be the armies of whatever nation the Lord would raise up. What in this case in particular would be the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Everyone with his weapons, and they shall cut down thy choice cedars and cast them into the fire. And this is like by the Lord likening the inhabitants to like trees. This would be obviously them being destroyed, like how a tree would be cut down and thrown into fire. And many nations shall pass by this city, and they shall say every man to his neighbor, wherefore hath the Lord Yahweh done thus unto this great city? So why did the Lord do this? Wasn't this like at one point the top city, in the area? You had, commerce and basically all these things that were going on. What happened? Why did the Lord do this? And then they shall answer, because they have forsaken the covenant of the Lord Yahweh their God. Yeah, didn't you hear? These are the people, they disobeyed their God, and now look at what happened to them. So where are they now? Yeah, I mean, a few of them are left, but I think, basically most of them died, and they were taken as slaves. Sheesh, wouldn't want to be them. Just like just a little picture, of people talk, because that's how people talk, right? It says here, and worshipped other gods and served them. So this was why the Lord did that to them. And similarly, right, in the kingdom, when questions are asked about this place, what happened to Babylon the Great? Like, why? How did this place become like this? Like, yeah, was it always a burning region or a desert? And then it was going to be explained to them, no, but because of such and such and such and such, the Lord did this. Verse 10, weep ye not for the dead, neither bemoan him, but weep sore for him that goeth away, meaning him that is taken away captive. And this is generally speaking, but also being directed at Shalom, which was, I believe his throne name was Jehoahaz. For he shall return no more, nor see his native country. For thus saith the Lord Yahweh touching Shalom, the son of Josiah, king of Judah. So maybe it was Josiah who was reigning at this time. But anyway, Shalom was, his name was later changed to Jehoahaz, right? And he was the one that, let's look him up here. Jehoahaz. When Pharaoh Necho came through the land after Josiah was slain, the people set up Shalom to reign upon the throne, right? To sit upon the throne and to reign. However, on Pharaoh Necho's return back to Egypt, he ended up dethroning Jehoahaz and taking him as a slave or a captive into Egypt. And obviously he never returned after that, right? And then Necho set up, I believe it was Jehoiakim on the throne instead. So if we go to Jehoahaz, it says Jehoahaz the third of Judah, also called Shalom, was the 17th king of Judah. He reigned for 3 months in 609 BC, and the fourth son of King Josiah, whom he succeeded. His mother was Hamautal, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah, not the Jeremiah we're reading about here. He was born in 633 to around 632 BC. It says here, in the spring spring or early summer of 609 BC, Pharaoh Necho II began his first campaign against Babylon in aid of the Assyrians, because this was when the Assyrians were on their last leg. He moved his forces along the coastal route via Maris towards Syria, along the low tracts of Philistia, and so they show you. I think it was this way. There was a way by the sea, or way of the sea, that way, and then he had to cut through to get over to where he was trying to go, where he was met with Slakia was met by Josiah. Where we at? Yeah, it says here, and prepared to cross the ridge of hills which shuts in the valley, the Jezreel Valley on the south. There he found his passage blocked at Megiddo by the Judean army led by Josiah. After a fierce battle, Josiah was killed. The Assyrians and their allies, the Egyptians, fought the Babylonians at Haran. The Babylonian Chronicle dates the battle from Tammuz, which is July to August, to Elul, August to September of 609 BC. Josiah was therefore killed in the month of Tammuz, 609, or the month prior, when the Egyptians were on their way to Haran. Chronological considerations related to his successor limit the month in which Josiah was killed and Jehoahaz took the throne to Tammuz, which is like they said, during July and August. Anyway, so this was okay. Let me actually just read this part too. It says, although he was 2 years younger than his brother Eliakim, he was elected to succeed his father on the throne at the age of 23. This fact attests the popularity of the young man, and probably also his political affiliations or policy as being in line with those of his father. Jehoahaz reigned for only 3 months before being deposed by the Egyptian pharaoh Necho II and taken into Egyptian captivity. He disregarded the reforms of his father Josiah, as it says here, and then so on. So, going back here, this was what Jeremiah prophesied concerning Jehoahaz, or Shallum, that he would be taken out of his native country and he wouldn't return anymore. As it says here, for thus saith the Lord touching Shallum, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, which reigned instead of Josiah his father, which went forth out of his place, he shall not return thither any more. So he was taken to Egypt, and that's where he stayed and died. But he shall die in the place whither they have led him captive, and shall see this land no more. And we just read about that. Woe unto him that buildeth his house. So after him was Jehoiakim, or Eliakim, which succeeded him. And he was a wicked king too. All right. It says here, but woe unto him that buildeth his house by unrighteousness. And these were things, I mean, once again, general things not to do, but they were also pertinent to Jehoiakim because he did these things. Woe unto him that buildeth his house by unrighteousness, and his chamber by wrong. And it's going to explain what it means by that, right? That he useth his neighbor's service without wages, and giveth him not for his work. See? So basically through like unlawful means, oppressive means, the rulers will be benefiting off of the people. That saith, I will build me a wide house and large chambers, and cutteth him out windows, and it is sealed with cedar and painted with vermilion. So while people are struggling and they're putting in labor, he isn't enjoying the best of the best at the expense. That's the problem, at the expense of his people. Verse 15, shalt thou reign because thou closest thyself in cedar? Did not thy father eat and drink and do judgment and justice, and then it was well with him? So do you think because you're building fancy houses and living lavish, that's what's going to allow your reign to prosper? If you look at what your father did, was it not through the judgment and justice that he executed that allowed him to reign and to have a good and successful dominion? He judged the cause of the poor and needy. Then it was well with him. Was not this to know me? So basically, isn't this what it means to know me, right? By following my instructions and judging the poor and the needy and exacting justice, saith the Lord. But thine eyes and thine heart are not but for thy covetousness. So you don't see anything but your your greed and your covetousness. And for to shed innocent blood, and for oppression and for violence to do it. So this is what you're after. Therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh concerning Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, they shall not lament for him, saying, Ah, my brother, or Ah, my sister, or Ah, sister. They shall not lament for him, saying, Ah, Lord, or Ah, his glory. Meaning he's going to die, but his death will not bring about the lamentation similar to how the lamentation that was had at the death of Josiah. He shall be buried with the burial of an ass, drawn and cast forth beyond the gates of Jerusalem. Now, I believe he might have died during one of the campaigns or one of the sieges where the Babylonians came against Jerusalem, but it wasn't at that point that they completely destroyed it. So let's see if we can find his death. Let's look it up here. Death of Jehoiakim. Let's see. Do we just click this here? Okay. Let me see if maybe it's in the background here, in the rain. 3 years until... Yeah, okay, here we go. It says Jehoiakim continued for 3 years as a vassal to the Babylonians until the failure of an invasion of Egypt in 601 BC undermined their control of the area. Jehoiakim switched allegiance back to the Egyptians. In late 598, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II invaded Judah and laid siege to Jerusalem, which lasted 3 months. Jehoiakim died before the siege ended. The Book of Chronicles records that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, bound him in fetters to carry him to Babylon. Jeremiah prophesied that he died without a proper funeral, describing the people of Judah shall not lament for him, saying, Alas, master, or alas, his glory, he shall be buried with the burial of a donkey, dragged and cast out beyond the gates of Jerusalem, which we're about to read. All right. Let me see. I don't know if they give the exact. Yeah, so they didn't give the exact scripture in mentioning this here, but I do know that, the scriptures mention Jehoiakim, all right, which was the son of Jehoiakim. He was carried to Babylon, and spent the rest of his days there. So I don't see they haven't put any precept to substantiate that part here. But we know, as we're about to read here, where is it? Yeah, it says here, Jeremiah 22:19, referring to Jehoiakim, he shall be buried with the burial of an ass, cast and drawn forth beyond the gates of Jerusalem. So as it says that he died in the before the end of the siege. Now it's not exact, like he doesn't give details as to how he died, but we know that's how he met his end. It was not an honorable way. Go up to Lebanon and cry, and lift up thy voice in Bashan, and cry from the passages, for all thy lovers are destroyed. Right, those that they're allies, right? Because we just read here that rather than staying under the hand of the Babylonians, Jehoiakim ended up switching allegiance to the Egyptians, because Judah was constantly seeking alliances with these nations, thinking that would be their support. And that's why the Lord had the prophets tell him, look, you're trusting in these people here. They're not going to do you any good. Okay, I'm your God. I'm above them all. And yet you forsake me and serve idols. Actually, I see something interesting here as well. It says, Josephus writes that Nebuchadnezzar slew Jehoiakim along with high-ranking officers, and then commanded Jehoiakim's body to be thrown before the walls without any burial. So there's a bit of inside information there. Verse 21, I spake unto thee in thy prosperity, but thou saidest, I will not hear. So when you were doing good, right, the scriptures mention Jeshurun waxed fat and kicked. So when you were doing good, which kicking, it's when you have like a cattle, right, cattle or oxen or whatever, and you're trying to control it to go in a certain direction. Sometimes when they don't want to move, and you use something like a goad to like prick them, to force them to go in a certain way, they'll either just stay there, or try to backslide, or they'll kick back with their legs. Okay, as like, you ever seen a horse and something is by its tail and it just kicks back to sort of like, get it away, or try to fend off those pricks from that goat, which is like a sign of like rebellion, right? So as it says, the Lord said he spake to you in your prosperity when you were doing good, and or before the evil days, and Israel didn't want to hear the Lord. As he says, this have been thy manner from thy youth. So you've been like this from the very beginning, from when you were first formed as a nation, that thou obeyest not my voice. Hard-headed, hard of hearing, stiff-necked from the very beginning. The wind shall eat up all thy pastors, and thy lovers shall go into captivity. And these represent the places they sought support, right? Be it other nations or even other gods, but mainly these other nations, the neighboring nations that they try to seek support from, because they also were eventually made subject to the same empire that had dominion over Judah at that time. So the Lord is saying they're not going to be of any help to you. Surely then shalt thou be ashamed and confounded for all thy wickedness. See, at that point, you're going to realize how dumb you look, for all the wickedness you've been doing, seeing that you thought you could have the support of these other nations, and now they're basically not there to, to help you. All right. Verse 23, O inhabitant of Lebanon, that makest thy nest in the cedars, how gracious shalt thou be when the pangs come upon thee, the pain as of a woman in travail. So those that are dwelling in Lebanon, right, which once again is like, has the it's known for having the crops and the cedars and the being a rich place. The Lord is saying, you basically chilling up there. Let's see how much you chill when I bring these pangs and sorrows upon you, like a woman that is in travail. As I live, saith the Lord Yahweh, though Kanai, the son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, were the signet upon my right hand, yet would I pluck thee thence. And I'm going to read this in the NLT, but it's basically saying that Kanai, which was Jeconiah or Jehoiakim, the son of Jehoiakim, the Lord is saying that even if he were likened unto the signet it was like a stamp upon the ring, to where the king, if there was any message that went out but it was stamped by the king's signet, it basically had the power. It was like, all right, this is authorized by me, right? So if we look up here, signet on hand Bible, right, it says here the phrase signet on hand symbolizes authority. So you see something like this: power and commitment. A signet ring was a royal symbol of authority used to seal documents, but it also represented wealth, personal identity, and a pledge between people. In a key prophecy, then it goes on more. So if you had this signet, it's basically like having power, right, to authorize things on behalf of the king. So when we read this in the NLT, it says, as surely as I live, saith the Lord, I will abandon you, Jehoiakim, son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, even if you were the signet ring on my right hand, I will pull you off, right? Because when you look into the history, it's not like they were following righteousness right after the Lord as King David did. Verse 25, and I will give thee into the hand of them that seek thy life, which is the Babylonians. And that's what ended up happening, right? When we look back here and we read a little further, it says here, he was succeeded by his son Jeconiah. The he here is Jehoiakim, right? So his son, which is where we're reading about here, about the signet, he basically ends up taking the throne, right, of his father. But as it says here, also known as Jehoiakim, after 3 months, Nebuchadnezzar deposed Jeconiah fearing that he would avenge his father's death by revolting, according to Josephus, and installed Zedekiah. Zedekiah was like a puppet ruler, which was Jehoiakim's younger brother, which in this case would be the uncle of Jeconiah. So Nebuchadnezzar set him up in power as king in his place. Jeconiah, his household, and much of Judah's population were exiled to Babylon. Now, if we look at Jeconiah over here, let's see what we can find about him. Okay, so they don't really give much about like how he reigned. Yeah, but I don't think that it was one of because the Lord wouldn't say that about him had it been like a righteous reign similar to that of the righteous kings of Judah. So the Lord said he will give him into the hand of those that seek his life, i.e. the Babylonians, which we just read about here, and into the hand of them whose face thou fearest, even into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and into the hand of the Chaldeans. And I will cast thee out, and thy mother that bare thee, into another country. And what happened? They were taken captive, as we read, into exile, right? Him and his household. Okay? So they were sent captive into Babylon, which was that other country, where ye were not born, because they weren't born there, and there shall ye die. So when you read about the history of Jeconiah, he was in prison, but I think it was Amel Marduk, which was one of the successors, like descendants going down the line of Nebuchadnezzar, that ended up having mercy and removing Jeconiah from prison and basically taking care of him. And then eventually Jeconiah died. But the Lord had that happen because it was through his line, right? Because that was still the line of David that would be preserved, that eventually Yahushua would come through. Okay, so his lineage had to be preserved. But he ended up dying in Babylon. But to the land whereunto thou desire to return, being Jerusalem, thither shall they not return. So you're not gonna come back to this land. You're gonna die in Babylon. Is this man Coniah, another name for Jeconiah or Jehoiakim, a despised broken idol? Is he a vessel wherein is no pleasure? Wherefore are they cast out? He and his seed. Keep that in mind, right? He and his seed, and cast into a land which they know not. I'm going to read this in the NLT because we know that that he had children, right? So it says, why is this man Jehoiakim like a discarded broken jar? Why are he and his children to be exiled to a foreign land? And the reason I mentioned to keep in mind his seed here, going into verse 29 and 30, O earth, 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 hear the word of the Lord Yahweh. Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, write ye this man childless, a man that shall not prosper in his days. For no man of his seed shall prosper, sitting upon the throne of David and ruling any more in Judah. Now, what this means is, when it says, write ye this man childless, Jeconiah wasn't actually childless, right? In the same verse, it tells you, as it says, for no man of his seed. So he had children. He wasn't childless, but why does it say, why did the Lord tell Jeremiah, as it says here, to write this man childless? In other words, have the records show as though he was childless. This was symbolic. It was to symbolize, because it was to symbolize that his descendants or his children wouldn't sit on the throne of David. Because when you look at the course of the history of Judah, when you had typically a dynasty, right, that was mostly the southern kingdom, was a dynasty. You would have the king, and if he had children or if he had heirs, they would be the ones to sit on the throne. But in this case, you would have a king, however, his heirs or his children wouldn't be the ones to sit on the throne, almost as though he was childless. Because a king who is childless is one who doesn't have an heir to sit on the throne. And in that case, you would have either somebody else that was next of kin, more than likely that would be the case for them to sit on the throne, right? So when the Lord said, "Write this man childless," it was to symbolize that just like a childless king wouldn't have one to sit on the throne after him of his descendants, this would be the case for Jeconiah, right? That his children weren't the ones that ended up sitting upon the throne, because shortly after him, after Nebuchadnezzar set up his uncle as a puppet ruler, that was the last of kingship, so to speak, for Judah, right? Because after that, they basically the heathen nations that were over us had it to where it was like almost like abolished, right? Now we know Yahweh Shai, which came from the line of David, which goes through Jeconiah, is the ultimate king, right? But I'm referring to like the under Yahweh Shai. So as it says, a man that shall not prosper in his days, right? Because he ended up getting taken captive to Babylon, and he didn't reign long on the throne as a notable ruler. For no man of his seed shall prosper. So his children were not sitting on his throne, right? As it says, shall not prosper sitting upon the throne of David and ruling any more in Judah. Okay, so I wanted to put a bit of emphasis on that so you don't get confused as to why it's saying write this man childless even though he had children. Okay, but there was a reason why the Lord said that, in symbolizing the abolishment for a period of time of the kingship of Judah. Okay, so with that brings us to the end of the book of Jeremiah, the 22nd chapter. Lord willing, this is edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Racha Kudash. And until next time, Shalom.